This is technically a rerun, in a sense that we have shot the M21 in the past, but we are shooting it again on the practical accuracy course. Not an arbitrary decision, though, because we do have better equipment. We are using mil-spec M118LR type ammunition. Also, we have shot it enough now to where we know that there's a permanent heat shift, a very predictable heat shift with the M21, M14 systems. Most importantly, we also have the debrief side. That's important for us to understanding how these things work. Now, if you're not interested in this type of opening stuff, you can skip to this particular timestamp and just go ahead and watch the intro. In fact, if you don't like Call of Duty or video games, just go ahead and click that timestamp. Now, for all of you who are still around, who are Call of Duty aficionados, listen, we talked to the game developers, and turns out there is a lost opening. And we were able to find that cutscene of the opening. And we were about to bring it to you. But don't tell anybody else. Because turns out there's a backstory to the M21. And it's supposed to look like the one that you're about to see.
Wake up. Wake up.
Where's McMillan? Where's Price?
We are asking questions. Do you understand? Where are you from?
Kiss my ass!
We start at the beginning. We know you are going to meet those two British soldiers. What are you doing in the exclusion zone? Give us what we want for your own safety.
I never gave them anything. I never found him.
Don't lie, Mr. Americans. We know this McMillan. We know you are there to give him something.
No, stop! It was supposed to be a quick in and out. I even saw him across the ravine. McMillan, he was there.
What did you give them? What was their mission?
I don't know. I lost the hit. No, it was a trap. It was your trap. I thought it was him. I even went in. I don't know what happened. It was a trap. My head.
There is no trap. Where's McMillan? Who else was with you?
He was Russian. What do you want from me?
Where is McMillan? And who else was with you there?
Kiss my ass.
Объект он мер.
Hello, this is Henry.
Hey, cousin! How are you? I have a new present I must send you. I think you will very much like. I'm missing a ghillie suit and a Scottish accent.
The weather feels about like what it was in that level, though.
Yeah. Shall we allow the M21 to revisit the battlefield?
We've picked like the most ridiculous day to do this one.
Yeah.
All right, I'm on it. Target 1. Impact. Neutralize.
You set?
Target 2. Impact. Wow, stack those. Okay, target number 3. Impact. Neutralize.
Okay, so the next one is 300.
Target number 4. Impact. Impact.
All right, I'm on.
Okay. Fire and ready. Impact. Impact. Okay. Target number 6, left of the pigs. Impact. Impact.
Left side on that second one.
What was that?
Was it on the slightly to the left on the second one?
I mean, slightly, but you corrected the elevation a bit.
Okay.
Next target, base of the flag.
Okay, 450.
Yes. Impact.
Is that on the right?
Yeah, bottom right quadrant. Impact.
Corrected.
Yes, impact.
Good. 500.
Impact. Impact. Nice. On the gong.
Left.
Yep,
I
just
see
slightly
it.
high. Impact. C-zone out beyond 700. Impact.
Nice.
Okay, 800. Didn't see any trace on that one, sorry.
What?
It's just windage. I could see the arc. The arc was good.
Ready?
Impact.
Okay, so I guess that's a course clear for this thing.
Yep. So I'm sorry I'm not able to call those quite as well as the ones on the open field. I'm also shivering profusely.
All right, so this is probably one of the rifles that I've wanted to redo more than any other rifle, Josh. I think that goes for probably both of us.
Yeah.
Actually, hold on. Fucking windsock came off of this thing. Significant difference in performance between today and the last time, I would say. But also significant difference in the weather condition. The wind did not let down, but the temperature is much lower. Josh, there's a lot we should talk about this. Why don't we take it to the debrief?
Sounds good. Let's go.
See you guys there. Oh, well, hello there. I didn't see you. You must have stumbled upon me enjoying the sunshine of the day as I was bird watching with my M24 sniper weapon system. Now, I hope you're enjoying the content thus far, because content like this is made possible not only by Slate Black Industries, but by the patrons of Patreon. Well, that's true. They are our main support, financially, intellectually, and most importantly, emotionally. They make content like this possible. And I'd like to invite you to come along, become one of the patrons of Patreon, along our journey of exploration of firearms technology and what we can do with these weapon systems. And if not, it's okay. But that's enough with this. Let's get on with the show. How can we put this, Josh? What would you say the M14's reputation is amongst the current age group of shooters out there?
Oh, it's definitely super hot and cold. You have a group who is very fond of it, and then you have everybody else who thinks it's not good.
Yeah.
Maybe an oversimplification, but that's kind of, for me, that's how I see it, in terms of looking at how people talk about the system online.
Mm-hmm. And yet we had many and many and many of these units in inventory for the military. And they sat there, and some of them were used and turned into, I don't know if I should say precision rifles, but sharpshooters rifles. And you also had another batch that the Navy used a lot for deck security. Regardless, the M21 initially came from the Vietnam era as the XM21, and some of the early ones were using those R2 scopes, the really old school 3 to 9x scopes with walnut stocks. Then subsequently, once it turned into the M21, a lot of them were upgraded to the fiberglass stocks to have less of humidity and effect from the elements to it. But people knew that the system itself, you needed a lot of fitting and a lot of work for it to perform like a target rifle, which is why actually the program itself took a less laborious approach and shifted towards bolt actions. It's simply logistically easier to deal with the bolt actions than it was to deal with the M21s. But years later, I think it made a comeback. Much like the 1911s too, the M14 system had always had a special place in a lot of SF operators' hearts. They ended up in a lot of their hands, and so then you ended up with the XM25 and the M25, which is an M21 in a Macmillan stock. So you had a further upgrade into an even more rigid stock. Now, again, you still need a lot of gunsmithing work done to these things in a Macmillan stock, because the way the rifle is laid out, it needs more points of contact with the stock in order to have that secure fitment. Now, also one thing too, and this is something that I dread, these accurized M14s, you're supposed to send them back to the gunsmith, or since there's no depot, the civilian gunsmith who can work on M14s, every 2,000 to 3,000 rounds. And so as you put it into your logbook, every single round you shoot in your logbook, you're just ticking closer to that to that point. It's not just wearing out on the barrel, but an entire overhaul of the system, because then it will shoot loose on the bedding. And so, and as you're getting into the global war on terror, as things are heating up, you need more and more units out there. That craftsman approach, the artisan approach to making a semi-automatic sniper system, it was just harder and harder to justify for the government. So we even started looking at the Mark 14s, using a chassis system for the M14s, which some of them worked, coming from Crane. Crane's the one who started doing that. But even one of our mutual friends who worked with SEAL teams was talking about a few stories where their soldiers, or so their sailors, received Mark 14s, thought they had to clean it right away, took the rifles apart, and instantly it turned from a 1 MOA rifle to a 4 MOA rifle. Ouch. So the systems are incredibly labor intensive to keep on track. I haven't cleaned my rifle, not because I don't want to clean it, but I cannot disassemble it to clean it without risking it losing accuracy from the stock mating position. So if you were to look at my rifle, right, it's got all the M21 upgrades to it. You've got the barrel, you've got the gas system, it's unitized in the front, the triggers work to the 2.5 to 5 pound range, but it's also dropped into a Macmillan stock, which would be closer to an XM25 that Special Forces were using, but technically not the Macmillan M1A that the Army was using, but more the Macmillan M3A stock, which has the more drastic grip angle on it, which is my preference of the Macmillan stocks. That would be closer to the US Navy's SSR, the sniper security rifle. So what you see here is sort of an amalgamation of two different schools for the development of the M14 into a precision rifle. That said, During this early to early mid GWAT era, a lot of units had M14 on hands. And it's not, they didn't use M14 systems because it was inherently superior to other systems. It was on the property books to these units, and they could use OCO funds, the funds that you would use to refit a unit before you left for deployment. You could use OCO funds for a civilian gunsmith out there to refit. That's how Smith Enterprise did a lot of their work, was by refitting a lot of these M14s that were already in the system. So it was a simple transfer where the property did not leave a commander's property book, and not purchasing new rifles to receive into the armory. So there is a huge distinction here that these were not chosen because the base system was easy to work with, super accurate to begin with. These were chosen deliberately because they were on hand. And this was a solution to a problem. It's an 80% solution rather than a 100% solution that you don't have on hand.
Very
So
much an
I think that
operations and logistics related issue as opposed to
Correct.
a performance related issue.
Correct. So if you look at some other rifles that we've talked about, the AK-4 and AK-4D relationship is very similar. The Swedes had a lot of G3 clones, which they call the AK-4, and they upgraded a lot of those to the AK-4D with spur parts to make it a precision-based rifle. Well, it's a sharpshooter's rifle that's a G3 base. And they did that not because there weren't better options out there. There are much lighter rifles than the AK-4. But they had all these AK-4s on hand. They had G3s on hand. So they just bought parts and refitted them into something useful. Same concept with the M21 turning into the XM25, M25, and also the Navy's SSR. Now, if you were to ask, who else outside of America used the M21? Or at the very least, let's call it the M14 accurize, designated marksman's rifle. There's really not a lot, but it's not zero. Because you have the Israelis who use the M14 as a designated marksman's rifle, but then you also, most interestingly enough, have the Baltic states, the Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians, who use the M14 as a designated marksman's rifle with upgraded parts, all the way into the 2020-2021s. Now, a lot of these come in form of military aid, so they were rifles from America being transferred into a foreign nation's inventory, which then brings us to the most interesting adaptation of the M14, in my opinion, because remember the M14 was conceived during the height of the Red Scare, when if you're red, you're dead. It's 70 years after the M14's existence. It somehow, in a very roundabout way, found itself, through the Baltic states, being given as military aid to the Ukrainian army to fight the Russians, the nemesis of the M14, in continental Europe, the location where a lot of Americans had envisioned that World War III to be fought against the Russians. It's just the M14 is a storied rifle because of things like this. And the M21 in particular is it invokes your imagination. It's attractive to a lot of people, in my opinion, because it's a mix between new and old. It's got an old rifle that's put together almost like you need an artisanal gunsmith to put it together to turn it into a sniper. But then you put modern optics on it. So it's an amalgamation of new and old. And that look, that feel, really brings out a lot of interest in a lot of people, almost like a steampunk project. And it's no mystery to me why that ended up in, let's say, video games like Call of Duty and All Gillied Up, specifically the level where you go into Pripyat. Now, if you're interested in Call of Duty or All Gillied Up, I recently recorded a segment with Josh over at the podcast side about Chernobyl and Pripyat. And specifically, there's a small segment in there where I talked to Josh about, exactly how accurate did they get Pripyat in the level all gillied up? It was 2015 was when I got to go to Chernobyl. The buildings, and you scanned the soil, it would still just start beeping like crazy when you got the Geiger counter close.
How bad is yours?
This one only goes to 10, 11. The other one I had went up to 14.
I think they did a pretty good job at laying out how the city of Pripyat looked like, because they actually got the sports complex right. There's a swimming pool in the stage, I believe. And there's also, I don't know if they got the cinema, but absolutely at the end, the Ferris wheel looked exactly like a carbon copy of where I went. Except, and if you're interested in the Ukrainian use of the M14, I highly recommend the video that the Armor's Bench has posted a few months ago. But anyways, we'll drop a link at the end of this video. But for now, let's get back to the conversation with Josh.
So with all that history said, Henry, why don't we talk about the actual run? Because the actual performance that you put in on this run, I thought was really darn good, with especially the environmentals we had going on the day. I'm sucked right back into that moment, freezing up on the tower as we shot this in 30-plus mile-an-hour winds and frigid temperatures, well, at least frigid by Texas standards. And yet, as we shot out, at least through the first, up through 500, you were almost stacking these rounds on, reduced torso sort of vital zone targets.
Yeah, it certainly had headshot capability to a long distance, didn't it? And ever since I stopped using those super hot loads and I started using a standard military load, it also performed with much better reliability, something that I would be comfortable with taking into overseas. Now, with the presence of, let's say, Scar Heavies and Knight's M110s, would I prefer the newer systems? Yes, absolutely. Yes. The answer is yes. But that also takes time. I mean, again, it comes down to the time we've gotten to spend behind it. The rifle itself can be made accurate. You have enough money to throw at a problem, a lot of times you can solve that problem. It just comes down to how much do you want to throw at that problem. But the ammunition was great. The optics basically mirrored the loopholed Mark IVs that they were issued with back then. It was sufficient. In fact, this was a little better on the glass quality. The rifle itself was worked over by a master gunsmith who has decades of time on the M14 to M21 to M25 conversions, and he himself is a President's 100, so he understands what goes into target rifle, M14 based target rifles. And so it was that when we talk about that triangle for the weapon system, the ammunition, the optic, and the delivery system, all of them just worked out in this environment. And on top of that, the software is the biggest thing. We were able to identify that at a certain point, when you start seeing those rounds go squirrely, start thinking about how you're going to compensate for that heat shift. And we did. I think it was the 650 mark. I think it was clean all the way up until the extended targets, right?
Yeah, you were clean until 650. But even then, I don't know if that miss was necessarily a heat shift related thing. I think when we talked about it the wind was ridiculous. And that round came in just high and just left of the target. And I remember specifically you and I talking about it. You were holding extra for the heat shift as we were doing the run. You were calculating that into your hold as you were going out. I think you had one miss at 650, and then you cleaned it at the 725, 750. And then there were like a handful of misses at the 800, which more than anything was just purely difficult due to A, the wind, B, it was very hard to see the trace out at that distance because of how the range is configured. There's a lot of brush right behind that target that obscures the trace of the round going out. Not to mention the wind was literally blowing the camera sideways. Now, this was such a clean run throughout. I'd say the other thing that I saw that was interesting is that out through, maybe 450, 500, the rounds were very tight, indicative of very precise shooting and a rifle that was capable of that precision. How much would you say you lost in terms of your accuracy going from the old cartridge, the super hot cartridge where you were really just trying to put them through the same hole, as compared to the M118 LR clone that you're using now? How much accuracy do you actually think you were giving up by going, or potential accuracy, I suppose, paper accuracy, do you think you were giving up?
I mean, honestly, as you could see, like, not enough to make that difference, right? If you're going from 0.4 MOA to 0.7 MOA, let's say you push it out to 800, that's 0.3. That's 2.4 inches of a difference.
Yeah,
that's
and
it.
your
2.4
overall
inches
cone
of
of deviation, right? Yeah.
Right. But when you gain the reliability that goes with it, that is a factor that is much more desirable than that extra 2.4 inches. But as we're looking at this, though, as we talk about this with the heat shift and everything, I think we have to readdress a question. Because how did the U.S. Army deploy sniper rifles? What is the U.S. Army's doctrine in running snipers? Now, we touched on this in a previous episode with the M24 with Rob over at Vintage Rifle Shooters Club, which he also has M14 based sniper rifles. So as sniper doctrine goes, you shoot one round and you're bugging out. Maybe two. That's a huge maybe if the circumstances allow. So if you're turning the M14 into a sniper system, are you really worried about that heat shift at round 20? Is that really a big concern that goes into it? Or are you okay without dealing with that heat shift because you're only shooting 1 to 2 shots? I mean, that's a huge question for a lot of people out there to think about, because 20 rounds is a lot in a fixed position for someone to pin you down. So it's easy for us to say when there's nobody downrange, but displacement is a very big thing when it comes to military arms.
Well, it's almost like the testing mechanism that we're utilizing on a multi-target KD range. It brings up potential issues that might not otherwise really be actual issues. So in certain, for example, the heat issue as one, you might never experience that unless you do the actual course that we're shooting, which is exactly what you dealt with on the original run of this. You had shot that M21 numerous times before, out to 700, 800, 1,000, and not had really any problems doing so. But you hadn't also just peppered out, 15 rounds at rather rapid succession on the way out to get there. So, there's some things that there's knowledge to be gained from certain testing and evaluation protocols, but whether or not that knowledge is actually pertinent, or whether or not some of it becomes relevant elsewhere outside of the testing protocols, is another matter entirely.
Now, on the flip side of this, I would say, when you're pushing it to a lower level, so in Marine Corps terms, when you're pushing it from the hogs to the pigs, from the scout snipers to your designated marksman, they may very well have a higher probability of shooting consecutive rounds in fixed location for defensive positions. Travis Haley, he's got a famous video where he was shooting significant amount of rounds in a defensive position at many targets. And so these are actual real world scenarios that you would be handicapping a semi-automatic sniper system if it did have a heat shift issue. And obviously, as we go on, we're looking at the pros and cons that go into the AR-10 based systems, so the M110s versus the M14 system. So you're looking at the maintenance, you're looking at the potential for heat shift, you're looking at many of these things, and the cost, the core of it, the cost. Obviously, the US government shifted towards the M110. And the Navy shifted towards the Mark 17 and Mark 20s. And so there's a reason for these things to happen. And I think a lot of times this just comes to a more learned approach for deployment philosophy, and understanding that this was also a time where semi-automatic sniper systems just weren't as prevalent in the West. Yes, the East had the SVD. Yes. The East were using the Dragunovs to great extent, but the Western doctrine was one shot, one kill. The Brits the same, the US the same. So then, for some, it may be strange that they went to a bolt action rifle, but that fits the doctrine very, very well. It's an easily maintainable single shot rifle. It doesn't slow you down that much if you're only doing 1 to 2 shots, as we've seen on Speedway with the M24. So I think a lot of times the historical context has a lot to do with evaluating arms like this.
Okay, so as we wrap this conversation up, can you give the audience a 1 to 2 liner about how much of the shift in performance in this run came from you being a better shooter than you were 2 or 3 years ago versus simply having greater knowledge of the particular system and not about general overall skill?
That's a very difficult thing to quantify. And the reason being is that knowledge itself, that time in field and time experience with the weapon itself, both translate to a heightened performance. I would say absolutely most vital, 8 out of 10 of this increased performance came from the extra knowledge. But you could also argue that extra knowledge is also what made me a better shooter.
Implicitly tied, right? Implicitly tied to you being a better shooter. Yeah.
The fundamentals are still there. I still am reading wind the same way. But I also know how the rifle performs much better, and I have the experience to employ better ammunition for it.
There you have it. The M21, take 2. A great run from Henry under very adverse weather conditions. And of course, if you guys enjoyed the run, enjoyed the video and the discussion, make sure to subscribe, like the video, do all the normal things, and talk to us down in the comments below. And until next time, we'll see you on the range.
But there is also a speedway, so check it out.
Impact! Neutralized! Impact! Neutralized! Impact! Neutralized!
716 is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, REDCON 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel 91, 1 pack, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, Steel 92, 1 Victor, 2 packs, REDCON 1.